The Maya. The Maya civilization was a Mesoamerican civilization noted for having the most sophisticated and highly developed writing system in pre-Columbia Americas, as well as for its art, architecture, mathematics, its calendar, and its astronomical system. The Maya civilization developed in the area that today comprises southeastern Mexico, all of Guatemala and Belize, and the western portions of Honduras and El Salvador. They did not call themselves Maya, and they did not have a sense of common identity or political unity. The pre-classic period, starting about 2000 BC and ending around AD 250, was the first period of Maya history. Around by 400 BC or so, early Maya rulers were raising upright monuments that contained images and eventually texts. A script was being used by the 3rd century BC. Tikal was a significant city in the pre-classic Maya period. It was a significant city by 350 BC. This early pre-classic era collapsed and the cities were abandoned in the 1st century AD, and the cause of this collapse is unknown. The classic period lasted from about AD 250 to 900. In the classic period, Maya raised dated monuments using the long count calendar, and this period marked the peak of large-scale construction and urbanism, the recording of monumental inscriptions, and significant intellectual and artistic development. The classic period Maya political landscape has been compared to Renaissance Italy or classical Greece, with multiple city-states engaged in a complex network of alliances and enmities. The largest cities had populations numbering 50,000 to 120,000 people. During the early classic, cities throughout the Maya region were influenced by the great metropolis of Teotihuacan in the distant Valley of Mexico. In AD 378, Teotihuacan conquered Tikal and other nearby cities, deposed their rulers, and installed a new Teotihuacan-backed dynasty. In the southeast, Copan was the most important city. Its dynasty was founded in 426. The king had strong ties with Teotihuacan. Copan reached the height of its cultural and artistic development from 695 to 738, a period that ended catastrophically when the king was captured by the king of Quirigua and was decapitated in a public ritual. During the 9th century AD, the central Maya region suffered a major political collapse marked by the abandonment of cities, the end of dynasties, and a northward shift in activity. The collapse likely had a number of causes, including warfare, overpopulation, environmental degradation, and drought. Within a couple of generations, large swaths of central Maya area were all but abandoned. Both the capitals and their secondary centers were generally abandoned within a period of 50 to 100 years. One by one, cities stopped sculpting dated monuments. The last long count date was inscribed at Tonina in 909. Stelae or monuments were no longer raised, and squatters moved into abandoned royal palaces. Major cities in the northern Yucatan Peninsula, like Chichen Itza and Uxmal, continued to be inhabited long after the cities of the southern lowlands ceased to raise monuments. Although much reduced, a significant Maya presence remained into the post-classic period after the abandonment of the major classic period cities. The population was particularly concentrated near permanent water sources. Mayapan was abandoned around 1448 after a period of political, social, and environmental turbulence that echoed the Classic period collapse in the southern Maya region. The abandonment of the city was followed by a period of prolonged warfare, disease, and natural disasters in the Yucatan Peninsula, which ended only shortly before Spanish contact in 1511. In 1511, a Spanish caravel was wrecked in the Caribbean, and about a dozen survivors made landfall on the coast of Yucatan. They were seized by a Maya lord. Most were sacrificed, and 2 managed to escape. From 1517 to 1519, 3 separate Spanish expeditions explored the Yucatan coast and engaged in battles with the Maya inhabitants. After the Aztec capital Tenochtitlan fell to the Spanish in 1521, Hernán Cortés sent Pedro de Alvarado to Guatemala with 180 cavalry, 300 infantry, 4 cannons, and thousands of allied warriors from central Mexico. They conquered the Maya cities in Guatemala in 1524 and 1525. Francisco de Montejo and his son, Francisco de Montejo the Younger, launched a long series of campaigns in the Yucatan Peninsula in 1527 and finally completed the conquest of the northern part of the peninsula in 1546. 150 years later, in 1697, the Spaniard Martín de Ursúa conquered the last independent Maya city. The Spanish conquest stripped away most of the defining features of Maya civilization. However, many Maya villages were remote from Spanish colonial authority and continued to manage most of their own affairs. Maya communities maintained their traditional day-to-day life. The basic Mesoamerican diet of maize and beans continued, although agricultural output was improved by the introduction of steel tools. Traditional crafts, such as weaving, ceramics, and basketry, continued to be practiced. Community markets and trade in local products continued long after the conquest. Maya beliefs and language proved resistant to change, despite vigorous efforts by Catholic missionaries. The 260-day ritual calendar is still in use in modern Maya communities in the highlands of Guatemala and Chiapas, and millions of Maya language speakers inhabit the territory of their ancestors. The Maya political system never integrated the entire cultural area into a single state or empire. Rather, the Maya area contained states and chiefdoms that were engaged in a complex web of rivalries, periods of dominance or submission, and alliances. Warfare was prevalent in the Maya world. Military campaigns were launched for a variety of reasons, including the control of trade routes and tribute, raids to take captives, up to the complete destruction of an enemy state. Warfare is depicted in Maya art from the Classic period, and wars and victories are mentioned in the hieroglyphic inscriptions. The ruler of a Maya polity was expected to be a distinguished war leader and was depicted with trophy heads hanging from his belt. By the Classic period, the trophy heads no longer appeared on the king's belt, but kings were frequently depicted standing over humiliated war captives. Right up to the end of the post-Classic period, Maya kings led as war captains. Maya inscriptions show that a defeated king could be captured, tortured, and sacrificed. The outcome of a successful military campaign could vary in its impact on the defeated polity. In some cases, entire cities were sacked and never resettled. In other instances, the victors would seize the defeated rulers, their families, and the patron gods. The captured nobles and their families could be imprisoned or sacrificed. At the least severe end of the scale, the defeated would pay tribute to the victor. Maya armies were highly disciplined, and warriors participated in regular training exercises and drills. Every able-bodied adult male was available for military service. Most warriors were not full-time and were primarily farmers. The needs of their crops usually came before warfare. The Maya developed sophisticated art forms using both perishable and non-perishable materials, including wood, jade, obsidian, ceramics, and sculpted stone monuments, stucco, and finely painted murals. Maya art is almost exclusively concerned with the elite and their world. Maya art served to link the Maya to their ancestors. The art that the Maya created represents a wider variety of subjects than any other art tradition in the Americas and is unique in the ancient Americas in bearing narrative texts. The Maya nobility practiced dental modification, and some lords wore encrusted jade in their teeth. Mosaic funerary masks could also be fashioned from jade, such as that of this king of Palenque. Maya stone sculpture may have evolved from a tradition of sculpting wood. The few wooden artifacts that have survived include three-dimensional sculptures and hieroglyphic panels. Stone Maya monuments are widespread in city sites, often paired with low circular stones referred to as altars in the literature. Stone sculpture also took other forms, such as limestone relief panels at Palenque and Piedras Negras. At other sites, stone stairways were decorated with sculpture. The hieroglyphic stairway at Copan comprises the longest surviving Maya hieroglyphic text and consists of 2,200 individual glyphs. The Maya had a long tradition of mural painting. Murals have been excavated dating to between 300 and 200 BC. The majority of such murals have not survived, but early classic tombs painted in cream, red, and black have been excavated at Caracol, Rio Azul, and Tikal. Among the best preserved murals are a full-size series of paintings at Bonampak, an example of which is shown here. Ceramics are the most commonly surviving type of Maya art. The Maya had no knowledge of the potter's wheel, and Maya vessels were built up by coiling rolled strips of clay into the desired form. Maya pottery was not glazed, although it often had a fine finish produced by burnishing. Ancient Maya firing techniques have yet to be replicated. The basic staples of the Maya diet were maize, beans, and squashes, supplemented with a wide variety of other plants cultivated in gardens or gathered in the forest. In addition to basic foodstuffs, the Maya also cultivated crops such as cotton, cacao, and vanilla. Cacao was prized by the elite who consumed chocolate beverages. Cotton was spun, dyed, and woven into textiles to be traded. The ceremonial center of the Maya city was where the ruling elite lived and where the administrative functions and religious ceremonies of the city were performed. It was also where the inhabitants of the city gathered for public activities. Elite residential complexes occupied the best land around the city center, while commoners had their residences dispersed further away from the ceremonial center. Architecturally, city buildings included palaces, pyramid temples, ceremonial ball courts, and structures specially aligned for astronomical observation. The exteriors of most paintings were painted either in one or multiple colors or with imagery. Many buildings were adorned with sculpture or painted stucco reliefs. Maya palaces consisted of a platform supporting a multi-room structure. Rooms often had stone benches used for sleeping, and holes indicate where curtains once stood. Some rooms in palaces were true throne rooms. In the royal palace of Palenque, there were several throne rooms that were used for important events, including the inauguration of new kings. Some palaces possess associated hieroglyphic descriptions that identify them as the royal residences of named rulers. Palaces were far more than simple elite residences, and a range of courtly activities took place in them, including audiences, formal receptions, and important rituals. Temples were sometimes referred to in hieroglyphic texts as God's house. Temples were raised on platforms, most often upon a pyramid. The temple shrines contained between 1 and 3 rooms and were dedicated to important deities. Such a deity might be one of the patron gods of the city or a deified ancestor. In general, freestanding pyramids were shrines honoring powerful ancestors. The Maya were keen observers of the sun, stars, and planets. E-groups were a common arrangement of temples in the Maya region. A structure was built on the west side of a plaza, usually a pyramid with stairways facing the cardinal directions. It faced east across the plaza to 3 small temples on the far side. From the west side, the sun was seen to rise over these temples on the solstices and equinoxes. Many Maya buildings were aligned with astronomical bodies, including the planet Venus and various constellations. The Caracol structure at Chichen Itza has slit windows that marked the movements of Venus. At Copan, a pair of stelae or monuments were raised to mark the position of the setting sun at the equinoxes. The ball court is a distinctive Mesoamerican form of architecture. The majority of Maya ball courts date to the Classic period, which would be about 250 to 900 AD, but the earliest examples appeared around 1000 BC in northwestern Yucatan. By the time of Spanish contact, ball courts were only in use in the Guatemalan highlands. Throughout Maya history, ball courts had an I shape with a central playing area terminating in 2 transverse end zones. The central playing area usually measures between 66 and 98 feet long and is flanked by 2 lateral structures that stand up to 10 or 13 feet high. The lateral platforms often supported structures that may have held privileged spectators. The Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza is the largest in Mesoamerica, measuring 272 feet long by 98 feet wide, with walls standing 27 feet high. The Maya writing system was the most sophisticated and highly developed of more than a dozen systems that developed in Mesoamerica. The earliest inscriptions in an identifiably Maya script date back to 300 to 200 BC. By about AD 250, the Maya script had become formalized and a consistent writing system. The Catholic Church and colonial officials, notably Bishop Diego de Landa, destroyed Maya texts wherever they found them, and with them the knowledge of Maya writing. But by chance, 3 uncontested pre-Columbia books dated to the post-classic period have been preserved. These are known as the Madrid Codex, the Dresden Codex, and the Paris Codex. A few pages survive from a fourth, the Grolier Codex, but its authenticity is disputed. The Maya recorded their history and ritual knowledge in screenfold books, of which only those 3 uncontested examples remain, the rest having been destroyed by the Spanish. In addition, a great many examples of Maya texts can be found on monuments and ceramics. The Maya writing system is a logosyllabic writing system, combining a syllabary of phonetic signs representing syllables with logograms representing entire words. Around 500 glyphs were in use, some 200 of which, including variations, were phonetic. The skill and knowledge of Maya writing persisted among segments of the population right up to the Spanish conquest. The knowledge was subsequently lost as a result of the impact of the conquest on Maya society. The decipherment of Maya writing has been a long and laborious process. Some elements were deciphered in the late 19th and early 20th century, mostly the parts having to do with numbers, the Maya calendar, and astronomy. Major breakthroughs were made from the 1950s to 1970s and accelerated rapidly thereafter. By the end of the 20th century, scholars were able to read the majority of Maya texts, and work continues to further understand the content. Commoners were illiterate. Scribes were drawn from the elite. It is not known if all members of the aristocracy could read and write, although at least some women could, since there are representations of female scribes in Maya art. There were probably schools where members of the aristocracy were taught to write. Although not much is known about Maya scribes, some did sign their work, both on ceramics and on stone sculpture. In common with the other Mesoamerican civilizations, the Maya used a base 20 system. The bar and dot counting system that is the base of Maya numerals was in use in Mesoamerica by 1000 BC. The Maya adopted it by the late pre-classic and added the symbol for 0. This might have been the earliest known occurrence of the idea of an explicit 0 worldwide. The earliest explicit use of 0 occurred on monuments dated to 357 AD. This was used to perform calculation and was used in texts for 1,000 years. The basic number system consists of a dot to represent 1 and a bar to represent 5. A shell symbol represented 0, and during the classic period, other glyphs were also used. The Maya numerals were from 0 to 19, used repetitions of these symbols. The Maya developed a highly complex series of interlocking ritual calendars. The Maya calendar was intrinsically tied to Maya ritual, and it was central to Maya religious practice. The calendar combined a non-repeating long count with 3 interlocking cycles, each measuring a progressively larger period. These were the 260-day cycle, the 365-day cycle, and the 52-year calendar round, resulting from the combination of the 260 and 365 day cycles. The Maya developed the Mesoamerican calendar to its maximum sophistication, recording lunar and solar cycles, eclipses, and movements of planets with great accuracy. In some cases, the Maya calculations were more accurate than equivalent calculations in the Old World. For example, the Maya solar year was calculated to greater accuracy than the Julian year. The Maya measured time from a fixed start point. The Maya set the beginning of their calendar as a day in 3114 BC. This was believed by the Maya to be the day of the creation of the world in its current form. The Maya made meticulous observations of celestial bodies, patiently recording astronomical data on the movements of the sun, moon, Venus, and the stars. Maya astronomy was used by the priesthood to produce prophecies. It also had some practical applications, such as providing aid in crop planting and harvesting. The Maya priesthood refined observations and recorded eclipses of the sun and moon and movements of Venus and the stars, and these were measured against dated events in the past on the assumption that similar events would occur in the future when the same astronomical conditions prevailed. Illustrations in the codices show that priests made astronomical observations using the naked eye, assisted by crossed sticks as a sighting device. At the time of European contact, the Maya had recorded eclipse tables, calendars, and astronomical knowledge that was more accurate at that time than comparable knowledge in Europe. The Maya measured the 584-day Venus cycle with an error of just 2 hours. The Maya also followed the movements of Jupiter, Mars, and Mercury. For the Maya, Venus was associated with destruction and upheaval. Venus was closely associated with warfare, and the hieroglyph meaning war incorporated the glyph element symbolizing the planet. Sight lines through the windows of the Caracol building at Chichen Itza align with the northernmost and southernmost extremes of Venus's path. Maya rulers launched military campaigns and sacrificed important captives to coincide with the first rising of Venus as the morning star. Solar and lunar eclipses were especially dangerous events that could bring catastrophe upon the world. In the Dresden Codex, a solar eclipse is represented by a serpent devouring the day hieroglyph. Eclipses were interpreted as the sun or moon being bitten, and lunar tables were recorded in order that the Maya might be able to predict them and perform the appropriate ceremonies to ward off disaster. In common with the rest of Mesoamerica, the Maya believed in a supernatural realm inhabited by an array of powerful deities who needed to be placated with ceremonial offerings and ritual practices. At the core of Maya religious practice was the worship of deceased ancestors who would intercede for their living descendants in dealings with the supernatural realm. As the Maya civilization developed, the ruling elite codified the Maya worldview into religious cults that justified their right to rule. This process culminated in the institution of the divine king, endowed with political and religious power. Maya households buried their dead underneath the floors, with offerings appropriate to the social status of the family. There, the dead could act as protective ancestors. Maya lineages were patrilineal, so the worship of a prominent male ancestor would be emphasized, often with a household shrine. As the elite became more powerful, Maya royalty developed their household shrines into great pyramids that held the tombs of their ancestors. Belief in supernatural forces pervaded Maya life and influenced every aspect of it, from the simplest day-to-day activities such as food preparation to trade, politics, and elite activities. Maya deities governed all aspects of the world, both visible and invisible. The Maya priests performed public ceremonies that incorporated feasting, bloodletting, incense burning, music, ritual dance, and human sacrifice. Pictured here is a sacred cenote in the Yucatan Peninsula near Chichen Itza, where human sacrifices were sometimes performed. The Maya practiced human sacrifice. Blood was viewed as a potent source of nourishment for the Maya deities, and the sacrifice of a living creature was a powerful blood offering. The sacrifice of a human life was the ultimate offering of blood to the gods, and the most important Maya rituals culminated in human sacrifice. Generally, only high-status prisoners of war were sacrificed, with lower-status victims, captives, being used for labor. Sacrifice by decapitation sometimes took place after the victim was tortured, being variously beaten, scalped, burnt, or disemboweled. During the post-classic period, the most common form of human sacrifice was heart extraction, influenced by the Aztecs in the Valley of Mexico. This usually took place in the courtyard of a temple or upon the summit of the pyramid. In one ritual, the corpse would be skinned by assistant priests, except for the hands and feet, and the officiating priest would then dress himself in the skin of the sacrificial victim and perform a ritual dance symbolizing the rebirth of life. The Popol Vuh was written in the Latin script in early colonial times and was probably transcribed from a hieroglyphic book by an unknown Maya nobleman. It is one of the most outstanding works of indigenous literature in the Americas. The Popol Vuh recounts the mythical creation of the world, the legend of the hero twins, and the history of the Maya post-classic Quiche kingdom. In common with other Mesoamerican civilizations, the Maya worshipped feathered serpent deities. Such worship was rare during the Classic period, but by the post-Classic, the feathered serpent had spread to both the Yucatan Peninsula and the Guatemalan highlands. In Yucatan, the feathered serpent deity was Kukulkan, although the cult of Kukulkan had its origins in earlier Maya traditions. The worship of Kukulkan was heavily influenced by the Quetzalcoatl cult of central Mexico. Today's Maya are generally descended from people who lived within that historical civilization. Today, they inhabit southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, and Honduras. Known collectively as the Maya, they number well over 6 million individuals, speak more than 28 surviving Mayan languages, and reside in nearly the same area as their ancestors. The Maya have managed to maintain numerous remnants of their ancient cultural heritage. Some are quite integrated into the majority cultures of the nations in which they reside, while others continue a more traditional, culturally distinct life, often speaking one of the Mayan languages as a primary language. Mayan Americans are Americans of indigenous Mayan descent. They come from places like Chiapas, Yucatan, Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, and western Honduras. In recent decades, many Maya have moved to the United States, mainly due to areas like Florida, Houston, and Los Angeles.